Hey, Shauna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
I'm really pleased to have you on. I have been following your career on LinkedIn and following some of your good stuff. So before we talk about all of this and all the stuff you're passionate about and what you're doing in the world to be of service, why don't you tell us who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. So I'm Shauna Bryce. I am the CEO and chief coach over at Bryce Legal, which is a career services boutique for lawyers. And I've had my boutique for more than 20 years. We have well over 1,100 client testimonials, which is super exciting because it's very difficult to get lawyers to agree on anything. So particularly proud about that. And what we're all about is helping lawyers be successful, happy, and fulfilled. And some of that is in their careers, some of it's in their lives. And obviously there's a huge overlap between those two things. We do some B2B work, also tons and tons of B2C work. And how I got into it, I'm a lawyer by training and by practice. I practiced law in two really large law firms, first in New York and then New Jersey, and I also practiced law in-house. And then switched over to the career side with my boutique, and on the law firm organizational side, the career side, the lawyer development side, all of that. I've been a chief legal talent officer and also a chief diversity officer at a multinational law firm. So that's what I do, and that's how I got to it in a nutshell.
It's easy to say why law firms should care about their workers. I mean, it makes sense financially. The law firm will be more productive. People will be more efficient. There's more profitability, but that never pans out in the short term. And there are really obvious things that a law firm or a candy factory or a retail shop can do to engage workers. I want to push a little bit beyond that because it's always up to the individual worker. And it usually ends up with an exit plan, but it also ends up with a mature conversation that this is capitalism, right? Right? I mean, am I wrong about this?
I think you're right. I think that there are a couple things that are that I feel like we had in our history in the US, we had these huge pushes toward empowerment of workers, recognition of workers. Like we don't have children laboring in coal mines anymore,
No,
right? Which
well,
I would
not
have
right now.
thought we agree was a good thing. But we seem to be regressing in recent years and now escalating that regression, right? The escalating the pace of that regression.
Right.
Where you do see a lot of employers, and I'm sorry to say a lot of them in the legal sector too, in law firms, where despite what you're saying, right, there has been study after study after study after study that shows treating your employees as actual people and caring about them pays you back as a business, right? It may seem more costly upfront to pay people a living wage, to pay people a market rate salary, to pay people a bonus that they deserve, but you get those back in worker loyalty, lower turnover, all of these things, right? You get that investment.
Yeah.
So despite all of that evidence, what it seems like we're doing, what we've decided to do in many businesses is to squeeze every last drop out of the lowest employee and squeeze that wealth and production all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
Right? So that if this employee, who is earning $65,000 a year, I will work that person overtime and not pay them just so I can get an extra patio set, for my second house or my third house, right? And we don't seem to have a lot of shame or sympathy around doing that, right? Like I've seen companies let employees go over $2,000.
Yeah.
Where you
Absolutely.
just say like that to me makes no sense. It's going to cost you far more than $2,000 to replace this person.
It's amazing how you worked on external branding with that client, but you also worked on her internal dialogue, her internal messaging. And, imposter syndrome is one of these things that gets thrown around a lot. But I think in general, many of us don't quite recognize what we're doing, how we're perceived by others, and how there's a gap often between how the external environment sees us and how we see ourselves. And all she had to do, among the many other things, including hire you, was just lead from within and have a different dialogue with herself about herself and look at the good things that have happened from that.
Yes. And it was so happy for her because her results were essentially immediate. I mean, she went from being a line employee to having a C-suite title in like 6 months, right? Because they very quickly were able to shop her up. And this is where I have told people too that a resume and that kind of branding is not just good for when you're actively job searching, but it becomes a really strong tool of advocacy, both for you to use on your own behalf, but for people in your network. I mean, to give her organization credit and her supervisor credit, when they understood that she was an executive, they were like, oh my gosh, we got to make use of her.
Right.
And look at all that she can do. Maybe another employer would have reacted differently, but then she could have moved on and found somebody who valued her.
That's exactly right. What you're telling us is that career development doesn't just happen in the best of times, but it can happen in the worst of times as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where taking a moment to take a deep breath, getting a different perspective, even if it's partnering with somebody else to help get an outside perspective on what's happening so that you can put it into perspective and make sure it somehow, whatever trial and tribulation you're going through right now, you benefit from it and you come out of it stronger than you went in. And once you know you have a path to that this is going to make me stronger, and you do what you're going to do, because I know I already have a path. I already have ways to come out of it stronger, and I'm executing on them quietly in the background. Like I'm running these paths to get me out of here quietly. It's so much more empowering. And so you take somebody who is feeling demoralized and victimized by an employer, by other executives, and you turn them into somebody, help them see that they can be somebody who has a plan, is executing the plan, and is getting what they want out of their careers, out of this job, out of their lives, right? And that flip is, for me as a coach, it's really, really rewarding to be a part of and to help somebody make that pivot. Because once they make that pivot, they never go back. They never go back. And then they look at where they were and they say, I can't believe that, a month ago or 3 months ago, I would have been devastated if it happened. And now I'm just like, whatever, right? Because they're already emotionally detached and started to move on. And in many cases, the quiet part of the job search has already started. They've done their branding. They're ready to go. They know what they need. They're moving on. Right. And so that is a really very rewarding part of my work at Bryce.
Well, I am so glad the world has you in it, fighting for lawyers, fighting for attorneys, fighting the good fight. The idea that you would have stayed in your old job is crazy, because now we see the good work that you're doing. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for taking a risk on yourself all those years ago to help others along the way.